Hello and welcome to the Courthouse, your #1 legal talk show. On the Courthouse, we get to learn about the law in plain, simple and entertaining language. We have legal experts every week telling us on various aspects of the law, and we also get to hear legal jargons, Latin maxims and the like. I am Itohan Olomu-Agbodo. We'll go on a quick break and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
If we have to give you anything, then we have to give you everything. Love Plus Channel 465 is simply the best. Because we have something for every member of the family. So dads, keep the team spirit going on with our intriguing sport highlights and reviews. And moms, cooking is never boring when you have our intriguing drama series. And for all your lovely kids, just sit and enjoy. This, and oh this. I told you, we have something for everyone. Because we are indeed all about you. So keep it locked on Love Plus Channel 465 on Star Times.
You're welcome back. If you just joined us, this is the Courthouse, our Law Class 101. And this week, we're going to be talking about election petitions tribunals in Nigeria. Nigeria just finished general elections at the presidential level and even at the state level. And a lot of actions are already coming to different courts. So we want to know which courts are these actions going to be filed in. So that's what this topic is all about. And this week, I'm joined by a senior legal practitioner based in Nigeria. He is Niyi Odunsi, and he is the senior partner of Adeniyi Odunsi & Co., a firm of legal practitioners in Nigeria. So thank you for being at the Courthouse this week.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. So election petitions tribunals, we just finished elections, although some are still being declared as inconclusive, some are still being conducted. But we need to know, when we hear about election petitions tribunals, first of all, what do we look out for? What comes to mind?
Okay, now election petition tribunals have been set up by the Constitution of Nigeria to look into complaints from elections. Yeah. Now you have three different groups of judges working on the tribunals. Now each panel consists of 3 judges, high court judges. Now you have the National Assembly elections, you have the governorship, and then the presidential, of course. Okay. Now, a tribunal looks into those complaints from the state houses of assembly elections and the National Assembly, which is the Senate and the House of Reps. Yes. Now, if you have a complaint and you're not happy with the decision of the tribunal, you can appeal to the Court of Appeal. And that's the that's the destination. You can't go to the Supreme Court.
That's for the case
that's
of the
for
National
the National Assembly and the State Houses of Assembly. You can't go to the Supreme Court if you are not happy. It ends, appeals end with the Court of Appeal. Okay. Then you have another panel looking into the governorship elections. So if any governor or anyone that competed is not happy, then they go before the tribunal, like you had in Osun State. Adeleke's case went to the tribunal in Osun State, which was later moved to Abuja. Then when he wasn't happy with the result, he went to the Court of Appeal, where he was declared winner. Now, what's the other party now?
The other party, they are trying to contest.
The sitting governor now has appealed to the Supreme Court.
And that is not supposed to be so?
No, it's supposed to be so.
Okay.
He can go, you can go from the governorship, you can go to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
But when it comes to the presidential elections, the Court of Appeal has original jurisdiction. Okay. It's no longer a tribunal. This is the Court of Appeal. 3 judges also If you are not happy with their decision, then you appeal to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
So that's the current structure of election petitions. Now, the judges are appointed by the president of the Court of Appeal. You'll recall that there was this drama when the, I don't know whether to call him former or estranged CJN, it was said that maybe he was charged to court to stop him from
sitting over,
being the one to
appoint,
appoint those. But he is not the one that does it. It's the president of the Court of Appeal that actually compiles the list of sitting judges to look into these petitions.
Okay.
So that's the structure for those tribunals.
So who swears them in? Because
it's the CJN that swears them in.
Okay, but
in this case, the compilation is done by the president of the Court of Appeal. Okay. But the CJN swears them in.
Okay. Now, you've already told us that each of these elections tribunals, they are made up of 3 judges sitting over as in hearing the matters as a panel. And now we have been hearing about forensic evidence being admissible or being inadmissible and all that. So tell us a bit about what type of evidence in election matters are admissible in court.
Well, it's a civil matter, as it were. As opposed to being a criminal one. So the laws of evidence would apply as to what is admissible and what is not admissible in court. Okay. If you're referring to the Buhari application before the Court of Appeal, where he brought an application to be allowed to inspect the materials, and then to also conduct a forensic examination of the materials. Now, the Court of Appeal granted the application to examine or have access to the election materials. But they rejected the application for the forensic examination, because what his application was to get all the voters' thumb-printed ballot papers and then get them scanned, because there's been that complaint that some people got those ballot papers and thumb-printed them by themselves. So where you have a person thumb-printing 500 ballot papers, for example, it is counted by INEC and reckoned with as proper votes. Now, how do you know if it was the same person that did all of them without having this forensic examination? So what Atiku wanted to do was to get all these ballot papers scanned and then invite experts who would be able to say if more than one person thumb-printed them. But the Court of Appeal said, look, this is against the law. The law does not provide for this. All the law says is bring certified true copies of these materials, and they're admissible. So the court said the electoral law does not foresee this kind of situation, and therefore refused to grant his application. But, well, he hasn't appealed to the Supreme Court, but he could. Or he could wait for the decision of the Court of Appeal, and then when he goes on appeal, he would make it one of the grounds of appeal at the Supreme Court. Okay.
So that's quite interesting. So in simple terms, the Electoral Act or the Constitution or what other law guides the Election Petitions Tribunal hasn't developed or evolved enough to allow forensic evidence. Are we right by saying that?
Well, you see, what he wanted, because part of the decision, part of the reasons for rejecting it was the fact that how do you have access to 80 million ballot papers?
But he's saying he can afford to do that.
To do that, yes, but they didn't see the practicality of it. Okay. Of course, they may get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, why not? Let him, have a go. Okay. So it's not that we've not evolved. These are the laws of evidence. In evidence now, we have the new law of evidence allows all this electronic evidence.
Okay.
So now in Lagos State, for example, you're allowed to even participate in a trial by Skype.
Okay.
So we can't say we haven't evolved to that
That's
stage.
actually a step in the right direction. So
see,
does it therefore mean that the evidence from body cams that we're hearing in the media, they are going to be admissible?
They should be. It's an interesting scenario. You know, when you get to court, a lot depends on the judges and how they accept whatever evidence you're bringing to them. So body cams, in the law of evidence now, the general trend is to say we will admit it if it's relevant.
Okay.
The test is relevant.
Relevance.
Once it's relevant, it should be admissible. But the weight that they will now put on it is a different matter entirely. Because the mere fact that it is admissible does not mean the court will rely on it when it wants to, get a judgment or make up its mind or come to a decision.
Quite interesting there. We've been listening to Niyi Odunsi, a senior legal practitioner in Nigeria, and he's been talking about the Election Petitions Tribunal in Nigeria. He said there are about 3 categories of these tribunals. The one attending to the presidential matters, he said that is the Court of Appeal, so it's not really like any other election petition tribunal. And we also have the tribunal attending to issues relating to the National Assembly and State Houses of Assembly, as well as that of the governorship. We'll take a report now, and our legal nuggets will be right back. Stay with us. An election petition refers to the procedure for challenging the results of an election. In Nigeria, a 3-man panel of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal is in charge of the petition brought by the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and their candidate Atiku Abubakar. The respondents in the petition are the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC), President Muhammadu Buhari, and the All Progressives Congress (APC). The electoral body had on February 27, 2019, declared that President Buhari won the presidential election, defeating his closest rival, Atiku. However, in their joint petition, Atiku and his party insisted that data secured from INEC server revealed that they defeated President Buhari and his APC, hence their petition. Other election results are still being contested at various tribunals in Nigeria at the moment. You're welcome back. This is still the courthouse, and this week we are looking at elections, petitions, tribunals, and we are focusing on Nigeria because of the recently concluded or inconclusive elections. And we still have Niyi Odunsi in the house talking about these tribunals. And you mentioned earlier that in the case of the presidency, that appeals is starting from the Court of Appeal, which has original jurisdiction. Yes. So therefore, the appeal can only go to the Supreme Court and no other court. So, and you've also talked about the issue of forensic evidence and all that. So now, look at this scenario. It's something that people ask about every time. A governor has already been sworn in, not the case of a sitting governor now. This is a fresh election. The governor has been sworn in, and the loser, in quote, goes to the election petition tribunal, and he gets judgment in his favor. So this governor has already been sworn in. What happens?
Well, what happens in law is the person that has won should take over. But he can't take over because obviously the man that lost, that has been sworn in, will go on appeal. So there's a stay of execution of a judgment of the tribunal. of a petition, election petition tribunal. So
of
there's a stay of
execution.
execution. That's why in Osun State, Adeleke hasn't taken over. You still have, what's his name, still in charge of the state.
Pending the
Pending the appeal.
So has there ever been a case where the governor that has already been sworn in is actually unseated in such a situation?
Yes. You remember River State.
Okay.
Governor Rotimi Amechi, as he then was, if I can use that phrase for him, was when the elections were about to take place, he was the one that won the primaries. Okay. But the PDP then decided to put somebody else in, and he went to court. At the end of the day, the court, at the Supreme Court, they said he was the rightful person because his party won. So he became the governor.
Then the case of, I think, Adams Oshomole.
Adams Oshomole as well. Okay. You see, so there are cases where this happens, but it has to be, fought at the Supreme Court before the governor can take over, because that's the final destination. So,
and therefore, when the verdict comes as in favor of that person, it means that the states will have to start counting as well. Because I think that's what happened, that we had some states having different dates and all that.
His tenure starts from when he is sworn in.
Okay, very interesting. So, because we didn't want to take you for granted that we know these things, that's why we have you in the courthouse today. So now, looking at the Electoral Act and INEC, they raise different issues from time to time that if the Electoral Reform Act has been passed, or they would have seen more improvements. What do you think about the proposed amendments, or what amendments you, as a lawyer, what do you want to see in the Electoral Act?
Well, this electronic voting is something that should be quickly speeded up. You find out that even though the law says presently you have to vote electronically, you found some places where, because the machines didn't work, people were allowed to vote manually. Now, these votes are not supposed to count. But you have some INEC officials who, for reasons best known to them, decided that they could go ahead and still do this manual thing. Now, the way it works, it's supposed to really be a very simple exercise. Somebody comes, is accredited, and votes immediately. It's not in the past where somebody comes, is accredited, they go and wait until everybody else is accredited, and then they come back to vote. Now, you are accredited, you go in, you vote. But the challenge we have, and what some have actually said happened, especially in these cases of inconclusive elections, where supplementary elections had to be conducted, was that someone in control of the state, for example, found it easy to get military men, policemen, to keep voters indoors. Then they would get other people to do the thumb printing. Now, there's no way to know if it's the people that actually registered that voted. Because what is being said is that you have many PVCs not collected.
Yes.
So they took these PVCs and then brought people in to get accredited with these PVCs and then
made them to thumb print.
Thumb print.
Wow.
So these things have to be dealt with by the law, by the whenever. They were trying to actually pass the bill in the National Assembly before the elections. Unfortunately, they couldn't work at some of these things. Another challenge is this inconclusive elections thing, which obviously is against the Constitution. All the Constitution says, like for the governorship elections, is once you have the larger votes, then you've had 1/4, 2/3 of the local governments,
Yes.
you've scored 25%.
Percent.
You are the winner. But INEC came in with their own regulations and said where you have a situation where there is some disruption in the process, and when you count the votes, the margin between the winner and the person following is not as much as the registered voters in that area, the result should be declared inconclusive.
Interesting.
Obviously, from what we've seen, there's a game going on with it, because in some of the states, all they did was to allow the incumbent muster more force.
Okay, so we don't want to go into the politics of it, or we're looking at the legality, we're looking at the legal side. And now you talked about the reform you want to see in terms of the electronic voting. I want to just ask you as an aside, looking at the number of political parties that were registered and we're hearing them, INEC took several days in just announcing results. What do you think? Just
Well, it's ludicrous when you have a political party that did not win any seat anywhere. What's the whole point of it? Some have said, look, it's going to evolve, we should leave them. But look at the cost. 245 billion naira to conduct elections. Can the country afford that? And then supplementary elections after the 245 billion. The National Assembly should come up with a law that says, and it was like that before, after the elections, once you don't win a number of seats, you have to be deregistered.
I think
You should
that has to be enforced.
team up with other political parties.
Form a coalition.
Form a coalition and come together instead of this waste of resources.
Okay, quite interesting. Nice thoughts there, but I told you earlier, I gave you a slight warning that we have another segment we call the Bar Book, where we share Latin maxims, legal jargons. So I want to ask you for your favorite Latin maxim, or your, in fact, give us your favorites, because this is your first time on the courthouse.
I would say nemo dat non quod. I'm sure you know what, what that means.
Tell us what it means.
You can't give what you don't have.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I'll stick with list pendants, and that has to do with a case pending in court. You get to find out more Latin maxims in our Bar Book segment. Stay with us. You're welcome back. This is still the courthouse, and we have our legal experts standing by to provide answers to the questions that you sent in. We want you to keep those questions coming in, but take a listen to these answers we have for you now.
when we're talking about copyright infringement, we don't go into whether it is paternity right or integrity right or all of this. We don't breach that. But most times that element is there. Most people, most times, sue more for the economic right, the right to use the work, and then and all of that. But yes, most of those suits, the people who are bringing them, the artists who are bringing those suits, are thinking more about the fact that it is my right, it is my work, and then I have a right to it. I have the right to be called the owner. But aside that, they're also thinking about the financial aspect, which is the economic right. And I think the both of them are always considerations. We can't just say put a blanket cover over this, but yes, the Copyright Act provides rights, and then the courts are willing to enforce the law. But each case will have to do with its peculiar circumstances, and it is only then that we can know whether your case stands a chance or not.
Well, that's much we can take this week on the courthouse, and this week we focused on elections, petitions, tribunals in Nigeria. And I want to say thank you to our special guest today, Niyi Odunsi. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge you shared with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And we'd like to have you some other time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, for comments, for updates, you can log on to our website on www.loveoplus.org, or you can send your comments to the numbers I'll be showing on your screen now. And we'd like to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. But for now, I say, don't just get mad. Go get a lawyer. Bye for now.